Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. First up on our list of historical highlights for the week is the Second Diet of Speyer, which took place on April 20th, 1529. A crucial moment in the Protestant Reformation, the meeting was held in the German city of Speyer under the leadership of Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor. It was here that Protestantism was officially acknowledged. At the First Diet of Speyer in 1526, German princes had been given some freedom in determining religious matters in their territories. At the second meeting, however, imperial authorities attempted to reinstate Roman Catholic practices. As a result, several German princes and representatives from 14 imperial cities issued a formal protest known as the Protestation of Speyer, which defended their right to follow the teachings of reformers such as Martin Luther and rejected the attempt to suppress the reforms. This written protest led to Reformation supporters being called Protestants. Next up on our list, and the subject of our deep dive, is the conversion of Dwight L. Moody, one of the most influential evangelists of the 19th century. Moody's walk with the Lord began while he was working in a shoe store in Boston, Massachusetts. On April 21st, 1855, Sunday school teacher Edward Kimball visited him and encouraged him to accept Christ. Kimball was hesitant when sharing the gospel, but his obedience to evangelize eventually impacted millions of people through Moody's ministry. Following his conversion, Moody became heavily involved in evangelism and Christian education. He preached to enormous crowds in the U.S. and U.K. and founded what would become Moody Bible Institute in Chicago. Last up on our list of historical highlights for the week is the expulsion of reformers William Farel and John Calvin from Geneva. In 1536, Calvin arrived in Geneva at Farel's request. The city had recently accepted the teachings of the Protestant Reformation, but wrestled with determining how church authority should function within civic government without an authority like the Roman Pope. Farel believed that Calvin's theological abilities would aid in strengthening the Protestant reforms taking place in the city. The two men attempted to implement stricter church discipline, including guidelines for moral conduct and proper participation in the Lord's Supper. Several city leaders refused to submit to these standards. As a result, the reformers declined to administer communion to said leaders, which the city council saw as an act of defiance of civic authority. On April 22, 1538, Calvin and Farel were expelled from Geneva. However, in 1541, the leaders of Geneva asked Calvin to return, and he spent the rest of his life shaping the city into an influential center of Protestant theology. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, founder and director of the Center for Christian History, talks with Gregg Quiggle about the conversion of Dwight L. Moody.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of This Week in Christian History. And we, as always, are interested to dig a little bit deeper into some of our Christian History Today posts and comments that we get to make each week about something interesting that happened on this day in Christian history. And we are focusing in on, as I look at my cheat sheet notes, April 21st, 1855 is the day that Dwight L. Moody accepted Jesus Christ. And man, what a day that was for the rest of the world. How about that? We're very pleased to have Dr. Gregg Quiggle with us here, who is formerly of the Moody Bible Institute and is one of the premier, if not the premier, biographer on Reverend Moody. Dr. Quiggle, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Well, it's wonderful to be with you. I'm glad you're talking about Dwight Moody.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, for those who might not be as totally familiar with him or kind of how he got started in his ministry, we'd love to know some background just on him as an individual, including then maybe how that evolved into what would become this, international ministry for a guy from England that ends up in, where he ends up showing up and being able to have this worldwide reach, man. I think it'd be fantastic to know.
Yeah, Moody is, if you want to make an argument for God having a sense of humor, or also the power of God's grace.
Yeah.
Dwight Moody's kind of a running argument for that. Moody was born in Western Massachusetts.
Oh, okay. New England. Excuse me, I said England. I should have said New England.
New England.
That dropped out. Sorry.
Yes, he is in 1837. He's born on his mother's birthday.
Huh.
And the town is on the Connecticut River. In fact, it's about 20 miles north of where Jonathan Edwards lived.
Wow.
To give you a reference point.
Sure.
So it's a stereotypical little New England town. And his father is probably an alcoholic. The family is on the edge. And when he is 4, his dad comes home from work. He was a bricklayer and complaining of pain in his abdomen. And by that evening, he was dead.
Wow. And
his mom was pregnant with twins, 8 months. And they were so far in debt that by the time the sun went down, the debt collectors had come and started stripping the house.
Oh my!
So they were able to hide his dad's bricklaying tools up in the attic, and they took the one cow they had, and she told a couple of the boys go hide it in the woods. But they had nothing. I think she had, if I remember right, there were 6 kids already, and weren't really connected to the church at all.
Okay.
And the family, she got multiple advices. Say, you got to farm these kids out. You can't make it. And she said, no, I want to keep my family together. And the local Unitarian minister showed up, young guy, recent Harvard grad, Oliver Everett. And he really paid attention to the family. And Moody talked about the impact this man made on him in terms of demonstrating the love of God practically. So some of the uncles pitched in, and the minister pitched in. And so, they were able to stay together, but education, very little education. You got maybe 5 years of formal education. The boys were often farmed out to older couples who didn't have boys in exchange for meals.
Wow.
They would go and live with another family, do chores, things like that, in exchange for food. Moody himself was, we would today say ADHD. He was one of those kind of kids. So even if he would have had time for school, he probably wouldn't have done very well anyway. Kind of always in trouble. There are stories about stuff he was doing as a kid. School plays, he hit a cat under a box, so it jumped out in the middle of the play. He put up signs for a fake temperance meeting, and everybody showed out. This famous temperance speaker was coming, and Moody had made this whole thing up, and he's hiding behind a tree laughing. The whole village shows up, and so he was one of those kind of guys. And when he gets to be around 17, he's like, I can't stay here anymore. So he goes to Boston, and that gets us to your date.
Yes.
And in Boston, he goes and gets a job at one of his uncle's stores. His uncle has a shoe store.
Okay.
And the deal is, the uncle says, I'll give you a job on one condition. You have to go to Sunday school. Okay. So he goes to the Congregational Church there in Boston, and Edwin Kimball is the Sunday school teacher's name. And Moody, he can hardly read. In fact, in my books or when I'm teaching students, I just show them some of Moody's writing. Punctuation was optional for Moody, and spelling was. He writes back home, and he's writing to his brother. I think it's George, and he's trying to write somewhere the psalmist says, and he spells psalmist Saimest. That's psalmist, and says is Sais. So it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
Wow.
So he goes to this Sunday school class, and a lot of the other boys, young men, are Harvard students. And so the guy says, well, open your Bible to John. Well, Moody, and he can tell. And at one point, Kimball just says, the Lord was telling me I got to go talk to this guy. So he goes to the shoe store, and Kimball says, I don't remember what I told him. And Moody will even say, I'm not sure exactly what he told me, but I remember that man's hand on my shoulder.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew he loved me, and I knew Jesus loved me. And he has a conversion experience. Now, what he fully understood is not clear. He tried to join the church, and he couldn't give a coherent testimony. So he had to wait a year before they accepted him fully into membership. Yeah, because the interview is something like, well, what has Jesus done for you? Oh, well, he's done many things for us. I think he was converted, but he had such little knowledge that for Moody, this is the classic case of believe in order to understand. So his life is one growing in understanding. And this is a guy, again, that is not a reader. Most of Moody's theology is caught rather than taught. He listens and watches and observes, and that's how he learns.
And absorbs it after that. But doesn't this, so many people, right? Just pick any life anywhere. So much of what you end up being is where you have been and how you became that thing, whatever that is. Benjamin Franklin gets to be a great printer because he's hanging out in the print shops, right, with his brother or whatever, whoever, right? I mean, it's a thing that happens over a period of time. And so does Moody take that whole, hey, look, there are plenty of other people out there like me that might have heard, but they may not be able to articulate it exactly right. We need to be able to give them the resources and the tools so that they will understand those things, because I've walked in those shoes. Or is that a stretch?
That's part of it. The other part of it is Moody has, one guy says he has an almost womanly love for children. He knows what it's like to be a child that comes from a rough background, this single parent.
Yeah.
And he knows what it's like to feel uneducated. He regularly would say, the Lord didn't give me an education. I don't have an education. And he would regret that all the time. In fact, if I may, you indicated Reverend Moody. He was never ordained.
Really?
And if you made the mistake of introducing him as Reverend Moody, he would stop you. I am not Reverend Moody. I'm Mr. Moody. I'm a plain old Sunday school teacher from Chicago.
Wow.
Never pastored anything. He was just a Sunday school teacher.
Wow.
So
cool.
He was simple, and he knew how to connect to people. And when you listen to people talk about him, what made Moody effective was his earnestness. It wasn't the rhetoric. Spurgeon said Moody was the only man he knew who could say Mesopotamia in 2 syllables. He spoke outrageously fast. He slaughtered the king's English, and it was a Yankee twang, that New England thing. Never said Daniel, always said Daniel. 250 words a minute they figured he spoke at, which is outrageous fast. But he always, people could tell, number one, he cared and he believed. He really believed what he was talking about. And that degree of earnestness. And so he connects with people, particularly people that are at the bottom. And that's what's going to drive him. Because he starts in Boston, he gets bored in Boston. And the place to go if you're a young man, in the North anyway, during that time, is Chicago. Because Chicago is exploding. Chicago in 1837, when Moody is born, about 17 buildings. By 1900, it's 1.9 million people. It's the 5th largest city in the world. That's 63 years. And in 1871, 25% of it burned down. That's the Chicago fire. So you can imagine the speed at which this thing is growing, the opportunities. People are making millions and losing millions, almost literally month to month. So there's massive opportunities. So he goes to Chicago. And one of the reasons you can tell that he's so really genuinely converted is he is deeply committed to spreading the gospel, sharing the gospel. And especially with kids. So he goes to street kids, immigrant kids, the Catholic kids, the kids that are living in the slums in the city in Chicago. That's where he goes. And he starts bringing them to church. This is back when you pew rented, and he would rent a pew and bring these kids to Sunday school. And I mean, this is a disaster. These kids aren't dressed right. And so fairly quickly you say, this is not a good idea. So he says, fine, I'll go where they are. Rents a saloon, cleans it out, and starts a Sunday school. And the stories are remarkable.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with Gregg Quiggle by clicking the View Full Interviews button on the podcast page of centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and follow the Center for Christian History on Facebook and Instagram. Our next podcast episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.